What is the scariest real-life story you know? The Lake Nyos disaster. The lake periodically releases a cloud of invisible carbon dioxide that poisons everything within a 25-kilometer radius. In 1986, more than 1,700 people and all their livestock died without even realizing what was happening to them. I could not speak, I passed out, I could not open my mouth, I immediately smelled something terrible. I heard my daughter snoring strangely. It was clearly abnormal. Reaching my daughter's bed, I lost consciousness and collapsed on the floor. I lay like that until 9 o'clock the next morning. It was Friday. Until a friend came to me. He knocked on the door, I woke up. I looked at my trousers and was very surprised to see red spots on them, similar to honey. I noticed some starchy mess on my body. And there were sores on my hands. I did not understand where they came from. I opened another door and wanted to say something, but air did not come out of my lungs. My daughter was already dead by then. I lay down in her bed, thinking she was still sleeping. I slept until 4:30 in the afternoon. Then I went to the neighbors. They were all dead. Then I decided to leave. Most of my family was in Wum, a town nearby. I got on my motorcycle and drove. My friend also went with me to Wum. His father had died. When I drove through Nyos, I saw no signs of living beings. Reaching Wum, I could neither walk nor even speak. My body was completely weak. The Nutty Putty Cave incident. A caver got stuck and hung upside down for 26 hours in this narrow cave. Rescuers tried to pull him out with winches. But they had to do it extremely carefully so as not to break his legs. Because in his condition, this could lead to death. The rescuers almost pulled him out. But at the last second, the winch failed. And he slid back into the crevice. In the end, the guy died. The cave was sealed, leaving him inside. In the 80s, there was a sect in Mexico led by an American named Adolfo Constanzo. The cult members kidnapped people from tourist towns. They brought them to their community in the desert. And sacrificed them. Usually, they subjected their victims to severe torture for several hours or even days. From which they died in agony. Their rituals included vivisection, castration, removal of eyeballs, tongue, pulling out teeth, flaying, hanging, and so on. They gave the victims various substances so that during torture they remained conscious and did not pass out from shock. The cult believed that the more pain and fear they could cause the victim, the more powerful the body parts of the killed people would become, which the cult members would later use as ritual amulets. And also as food for the nana. The nana is a large ritual cauldron that stored bones, blood, meat, and other valuable items that the cult believed gave them power. They also made necklaces from spinal columns joined together and ate the eyeballs of victims during rituals. It is believed that during their 3 years of activity, from 1986 to 1989, they kidnapped and sacrificed more than 26 people to their nana. When the police raided their community, the cult leader committed suicide. Police arrested 14 sect members, but many people believe that at least a dozen more cultists escaped and are still at large. I am an eye doctor. Once a patient came to me with an inflamed eyelid. 2 other eye doctors had already tried to cure her, but unsuccessfully. They pumped all kinds of medicine into her, but it did not get better. By the time she came to see me, her eyelid had been swollen and painful for several weeks. Even though the patient was taking tons of medicine, she had no improvement. Neither the first nor the second doctor guessed to flip the eyelid to look under it. You know, sometimes kids do this nasty trick with their eyelid. In her case, it was very painful. Anyway, flipping her eyelid, I found something like an abscess with a thick sticky mass on the inside. I decided to poke it lightly and saw the clot move. It was not an abscess, but something else. Actually, I managed to remove it quite easily. It turned out to be a fly larva. The patient told me that a few days before the infection started, some gnat got into her eye. I removed the larva and within 2 days the wound closed and the patient recovered 100%. She used regular antibiotic eye drops. Yes, I have photos from that case if anyone is interested. A guy who survived a sinking ship found access to oxygen in an overturned boat. He sat under the boat for a long time, he had no water, only Diet Coke. The guy took a sip of Coke once every 7 hours. After 60 hours, he was finally rescued. All this time he was in danger. He could have drowned, he could have been eaten by sharks, and so on. Sharks are simply true Pepsi fans. They saw the inscription diet and left. The man's name is Harrison O'Keefe. There is a video of him being rescued. I remember reading years ago about a guy who served in the army. He returned from service and found his wife and 2 children dead at home. They lived in a remote area. It turned out the mother had a sudden heart attack, stroke, or something like that. And the 2 children died of hunger or dehydration because they were too young to take care of themselves. This is not a ghost story or anything supernatural, but as a parent, such cases scare me to death. Reminded me of another story. A dad, mom, and 3 kids decided to spend the weekend at their country house. But the father had to work on Friday. So they decided that the mom and kids would go without him, and he would join them on Saturday morning. A huge storm hits the city. A tornado destroys part of the city, including the area where this family lives. The father was a firefighter, and that day they were swamped with rescue operations. However, he was very glad he had sent his family out of town. He thought they would be safe there. His fire truck gradually finished all rescue calls, and he decided to drive through the city to look for people who still needed help, and also to look at the destruction. He decided to drive by and check on his house. It turned out to be half destroyed. But more importantly, the father noticed the mom's car on the driveway. The mom and all 3 kids died because they decided to wait for the father as a surprise. In total, more than 25 people died from the tornado. A year or so later, the father committed suicide. This story was told to my father by a former colleague of that firefighter when my dad was undergoing first aid training. I do not know how scary this story is, but when I was younger, my twin brother and I helped our friend deliver newspapers. One summer day, we suddenly smelled something unpleasant coming from one of the houses. We paid no attention, but 3 days later the smell began to reach the sidewalk. We went to the back door, where he usually threw the newspaper, and noticed the door was open. Entering inside, we looked around the house and found the dead owner. He died of a heart attack, and his cats were gradually eating his corpse. Alison Botha. On December 18, 1994, Port Elizabeth resident Alison Botha was abducted, raped, stabbed multiple times, and left to die. This was done by Franz du Toit and the Jens Kruger. They stabbed her 17 times in the throat. The wounds were so deep she had to hold her head up while crawling to the road for help. With her other hand, she held her organs falling out of her stomach, where she had been stabbed more than 30 times. By some miracle, the rapists did not hit a vital artery. So she did not bleed to death and was able to breathe through her severed trachea. There is a documentary called Alison on Amazon Prime. Although I warn you that for some viewers it can hit hard on the psyche. In 1949, Timothy Evans was wrongly executed for the murder of his pregnant wife and daughter. The real killer, John Christie, appeared as a prosecution witness at Evans' trial. After Evans' execution, Christie killed 4 more people. If the police had properly handled the forensic evidence, Christie would have been caught during the Evans investigation. And those 4 would have remained alive. The government declared Evans innocent only in 2004. It was not about forensics. The police simply beat a confession out of Evans. We analyzed this case in linguistics classes. A forensic linguist was able to determine that his verbatim confession was actually written by 2 different people. That is why he was eventually posthumously acquitted. The story of Reina Marroquin. In the 60s, a young woman had an affair with her boss and got pregnant by him. After threatening to tell the boss's wife everything, he killed her and then hid the body in an industrial barrel. He kept this barrel in his house for many years. None of the subsequent owners of the house ever opened it because of its heavy weight. Finally, in the 90s, a guy decided to get rid of the barrel and, opening it, saw that there was something in it. The investigation revealed the connection between this barrel, the girl, and that man. DNA testing made it clear that the man was the father of the unborn child. In the end, the man committed suicide before the police could arrive and arrest him. The mother of the found girl was about 80 years old when she was told her missing daughter had finally been found. She claims that for many years after her daughter went missing, she had dreams that her daughter was in a metal container. The Jamie Kloss story terrifies me. Last year in rural Wisconsin, a 13 or 14-year-old girl went missing after her parents were found murdered in their own home. Police arrived within 4 minutes, but by that time she had simply vanished. Understandably, there were speculations that she had been kidnapped, or that she was involved in the murder, or was already dead, and so on. But no one could really say where she had gone. 88 days later, during the cold northern Wisconsin winter, she ran out into the street to a woman walking her dog. She had been held captive about a 40-minute drive from her home. All this is scary enough. But the worst part is that she did not know the guy who killed her family and kidnapped her at all. Once he was driving to his new job, where, by the way, he lasted only 1 day, and saw the girl getting on a school bus. At that moment, he decided he would steal her. There were no red flags, he had no contact with her before. There was absolutely nothing she or her family could have done to avoid what happened. A creepy guy saw a girl hundreds of meters away and decided he would kill her family and take her for himself. Jamie is my cousin. Of course, in such situations, no one wants to think the worst, but by the time she managed to escape, we all thought she was already dead. I had a wild emotional high when I suddenly saw her alive. I was in total shock, because quite recently my aunt and uncle had been killed. That period was just crazy. I came across this story in all the magazines. Classmates constantly discussed this case, not knowing we were cousins. I saw all of America grieving with my family about this tragedy and so on. For a long time, I did not allow myself to show strong feelings about what happened, as I had the opinion that I was too far removed from this situation. After all, I am a cousin who only saw that family a couple of times. Basically, I thought only close relatives feel all the pain and heaviness of the situation. And seeing other complete strangers crying, who did not even know this family, was just strange. It even annoyed me. Now I look at the expression of grief more simply and can appreciate that a whole community of people came together and expressed support. But I still have mixed emotions about this case.